Who's next?
Okay. For the last 5 years, I've been collecting tokens of the stores in Prince Edward area. And I've got a $10 bill to the Taylor family of paper money. And then I've got a token of Cunningham store here in Farmville, which I haven't know anything about it. And then I've got one of Williams store in Panther, and I've got one in Liggins store in Panther, but I didn't have time to get that out. And I'd like to know more about Cunningham store, but I can't find out anything about it.
Wasn't it a confectionery?
Oh, we mean,
Oh, it was a candy store, wasn't it? Didn't Cunningham have a confectionery?
oh, I don't know, it's, man told me he sold all kind of groceries, that's all he told me. And they gave the, if you took eggs in or something to them, they give you these tokens that you have to come back to them to spend them.
Any dates on it?
No, they just tell you how much, and this one was in Farmville, Virginia, and the other one's in Panther, of course. No dates on top, just, you can use this, it says that you can use this, well, 5 cents worth of this token money to buy 5 cents worth of groceries.
Robert Taylor told us that in 1938, the federal government made them take all the tokens back in.
They had to take them in, and some of them didn't get back in, thank goodness. You know,
Well, see, there ought to be several more, I would think, tokens for farm. I think there's what C. Ashby Armistead or something like that has one. That was on eBay one time with big money. It was a hard one to find. And what about the C.T. Evans from Evergreen? You know, that Max, Karen. That seems to be a fairly common one. They seem to be around.
And Ligon and Panther and Williams both are probably common. But this Cunningham must have been very bad for a man in Iowa wanted to very bad as I did. And it
Yeah, I'll leave it.
mm-hmm.
I think the Wiggins and Cunningham are related.
Spurlock, I can't think of his first name. He said he remembered this store up on Main Street somewhat close to the courthouse, he thought. He didn't know what, just remember a country store.
So, are there any others for Prospect other than
I don't
Tyler?
think so, not that I know of.
Did Robert told you it was 38 because of our neighbors, the Emmerts, came here in 46, and they were using that money when they came here in 46.
That's what Robert told me, he had called his in 1938.
My name's Nancy. These really aren't Prince Edward, but it's close by. These are my family Bibles. This one right here dates back to 1795. It has entries in it back to the late 1700s, early 1800s, people in Nottoway County. This book is 1850. My great-great-grandfather was Captain John Edward Perkinson. He was captain of the Jetersville Grays during the Civil War. Jetersville at one time was called Perkinsonville. After Mr. Perkinson died, his widow married Mr. Jeter, and he renamed it. Most of you know me. My name is actually Nancy Randolph Whitaker Morris, and I am related to the Randolphs of the Czar, and the reason I am is twofold. My line goes back to, my grandmother was a Perkinson. She was born at James Ordinary. It goes back to Thomas Jefferson Perkinson, who married a Bland, back to Richard Bland, House of Burgesses. He gave the famous Stamp Act speech during the 1700s. He married Elizabeth Randolph. She was the only daughter of Colonel Edward Randolph, Thomas Randolph, that was progenitor of all the Randolphs. The reason I'm related to Richard and John is their mother was Frances Bland, who was the niece of my 8th great grandfather, Richard Bland. But this these Bibles are, this one's kind of falling apart. If you're interested in looking at them, I brought them for everyone to see. There are dates written in here dating back to the 1800s of the Perkinsons, and it's interesting to note that these, in this book, it's in the middle of the Bible. In the older books, and I ask that you be really careful because the pages are starting to fall apart. There are some notaways, and I'd be interested if anybody recognizes any names in here. There's some bowlings, and my great-great-grandmother was a shore. I don't know if anybody knows these shores that were from Amelia or Nottaway County. I know there was a guy shore that lived here, wasn't there, at some point in Farmville? Back like the 1800s? Is that right? Anyway, these are here for you to view. I have actually I looked and hunted for my picture, but I have a picture of my great-great-grandfather in his full dress Civil War uniform. He was at the Battle of Rich Mountain, which was one of the first skirmishes of the Civil War, and they took a gentleman's surrender, and he went home for the rest of the duration of the war, until the Confederates came through and ransacked their home. Won't they just leave them here?
Whoever wants to be next, Edwina, Robert, Jack?
Who else?
Go on up there, Jack.
I'm not going to talk a whole lot, but I do want you to hear me. I'm going to pass this piece of money around. During the Civil War, this wasn't uncommon for the counties to issue money. I did not bring this up when we went out to work. I studied Mr. Worsham, and Worsham is the only town I know of in Prince Edward County that Board of Supervisors named after a person. They thought so much of the clerk of the court that they made him name Worsham. It used to be Prince Edward Courthouse. He lived there after. Anyway, they issued this money in 5, 10, 15, 50-cent piece. And they passed it. He signed, Mr. Worsham signed each one of them by hand. When they tore the Paulette house down here, where Piedmont Planning District office is, down there was a shoebox full of it there that the Drumellas and Paulettes had, and when the descendants just didn't do anything, they knocked the house down. The man that did the wrecking asked me that I wanted it, and I told him I'd give him $1 for it. So I bought it, and I've given it to people all over the county, so you probably have seen some of it. They did the same thing over in the Philippines and New Guinea and Borneo when during World War II, those countries issued that digital currency, and I have some of it that I got from all over there. Please don't take that, for that's the last piece of God.
Thanks,
Look at
Jack.
it all you want to.
Who's next? Neil. And they go riding, and they end up going down through Virginia, and then back to New York, and they did a book on it, and I guess the woman does the writing, and I guess it's her husband, Walter. They both have the same name. She is Louise Closser Hale, drawings by Walter Hale, and he does the illustrations. But they come through Farmville, and on page 199, they stay at the Prince Edward Hotel. And when I saw it on the computer, I was looking at it, that's not Farmville. Did a double take. Sure enough, that's Morton's Tavern right there, in the back end of the Prince Edward Hotel. It's kind of the opposite angle that you normally see it from. So I thought that was very interesting. You might want to take a look at that. And a little bit of the commentary about being in Farmville, very interesting. Apparently they're looking for a map, and they cannot find it. But then they understand that General Grant stayed next door at the Prince Edward Hotel, named after the county.
What year was that?
This is 1916. And so they go in to discuss this, meet Charlie Chick, my host, Charlie Chick. He's there. And that this hurried me into the hotel to be introduced by my strange new friend to the proprietor. The strange new friend she referred to as earlier. I don't know whether the warm friend I made at Farmville was a chauffeur or the rich young man of the town. It is hard to tell in the South where they are all so well-mannered. But Charlie Chick takes her upstairs to the room, and they're looking at things on the writing at the desk where Grant was. He mentions how the cannonball almost hit him, missed him by 10 feet. Well, what did Grant do? Oh, he went
went downstairs real quick and smoked a cigar downstairs. And Mr. Chick was sorry he wasn't older, which was most gallant even for a Virginian, but he did not remember Grant at all, although his old clerk who came on at night could tell the whole story. Then they go to eat later on in the evening, and it says that the old waiter at dinner could have told us more, I'm sure, but he was so deaf, and I feared to rouse the peaceable citizens at the little tables by stirring up old wounds. I did ask once if he remembered Grant, but he replied that it was hard to get the chicken livers as they were used for the gravy. It was beautiful.
Talk about what I got here. If I'd known Nancy's going to bring a family Bible about her notorious kin, I brought my family Bible that has in there about the birth and the death of my great uncle, who was Tom Dooley, who was, hang down your head, Tom Dooley. He wasn't from around, he was down in North Carolina, came back from the Civil War, and took up again with his girlfriend, last name was Foster, and she gave him the gonorrhea, and he realized that she had acquired it while he was gone to the war. But that's another story. But I'm the great nephew of Tom Dooley, who was hanged for killing Laura Foster.
Okay.
All right, no use to pass this around. This is an old brick, but it has special history. It's related to the College Presbyterian Church in Hampton City. This is a homemade, hand-formed brick, or a molded brick. It dates from 1820. The present College Church building was built in 1860 in the amazing space of 3 months in the summertime of 1860, and built from handmade brick there. Some of you are old enough to remember that in the summer of 1955, the front wall of the church there on the porch crumbled away, and that was a picture of that in the 50-year page this past summer in June of 1955. It crumbled away. It was been the basement was being dug out, and Robert Taylor tells me he told the folks not to meet in there that day, but they did anyway, and about 15 minutes after the morning worship service, the whole front wall of the church fell in. But that is another story, not unrelated to this brick. This, as you face College Church on the college campus, it looks like it's a part of the contiguous college campus, but it is really not. There are 4.5 acres there that were bought by the continuing congregation, purchased from an individual in 1820, and a church building, a small brick building, was constructed there. As you face the College Church building, the present building, there is a sidewalk coming in from Atkinson Avenue. The original church building was in the area of that sidewalk, and it faced due south or toward the cemetery and college administration building there now. So that the original road there curved around beyond the cemetery to the south, or around where the college police station now is, in a building called Restover, so that you got out of your carriage or got off your horse and walked through the cemetery to the church. The only thing we really know about this church is that it was a small brick building, and the description in several written forms says, with ugly Tudor arches, whatever that might mean. It was insufficient for the seating of the existing congregation, and so, though it was built in 1820, it was pulled down in the spring of 1860, and on the present church building, a course of brick that come up about 6 feet high are obviously older brick and coarse
coarser brick. They were pirated from that original building to be the basic foundation, or no, not foundation really, the first layering of courses of brick for the 1860 building. Now in 1992, when we were putting a, what I think is a rather artfully designed access ramp up to the existing front porch of the present building, little bulldozer was in there, and folks who had memories of the 1955 collapse of the front wall were very concerned about this. But as they dug out for the footings of our access ramp that extends down that present sidewalk, a number of these old bricks were unearthed from that original building of 1820. And several people took those for their own keepsake. When Walter Bortz was inaugurated as president in 1991, I knew where some of these bricks were underneath the dirt there. And so I went out and dug up a brick for him and a brick for me. And I kind of cleaned his brick up, and at his inauguration service prior to that day, the evening before, I preached a sermon for the college community on the, well, really the beginning of the inauguration of the present administration there. I preached from Isaiah, from a text, "Look to the rock from which you were hewn, and to the quarry from which you were dug." And I had a little brass plaque made up with that quotation on it, affixed to his brick, and I gave it to him as a part of his inauguration, as a reminder that his own administration was built on prior generations. So that's an 1820 brick from the original building of College Church. And you know, I don't need to pass this around. Y'all know what a brick looks like.
Well, Willie, where do you think the brick came from locally for?
Well, they were, we know from written records that it was the oldest building at Hampton City burned, you know, about 10 years ago, that which was called the Alamo, the oldest continuous building. And that was that was all of those original early 19th century buildings were kilned from Prince Edward County mud right there on the down campus. I don't know where. You know, to build like the present building, to have built it in the space of 3 months, I got to say they had to have had you know, 200 slaves working on this or something, because they just could not have dug, formed, killed, say nothing of putting it up, you know. Now that building, present building, one of the reasons, you know, that people were really nervous about anything going on that building, like when we added the lovely addition there about 2 or 3 years ago, is that it has no footings. That building has absolutely no footings. It's got a course of 4 brick going into the ground, and those things disintegrate, you know, in wet weather, or when you get really wet weather. Those older bricks, these very porous ones dating from 1820 that are in the first round structures of the present building, they all wick up water like everything because they're so porous, like this brick is.
Yeah,
I could hardly sleep that night. Thanks, Judge Wayne. Right on. Bless your heart. Here's something else. I got this as a copy of something I think I got from Billy. I think Billy made me a copy. I think he got it from Robert Taylor or something. There's a little pamphlet here on Prince Edward County for a home in Virginia. This was published about 1888, I believe. Yes, and it was done to promote economic development in Prince Edward County. And it's really neat because it talks about fruit variations on apples and grapes and things like that that were developed here in the county. It'd be interesting to know if Virginia Tech has some kind of seed library or species, whatever you want to call it, these different types of fruits, whether they still have them propagated or they can be regenerated somehow. Anyway, it's just kind of interesting. But the town contacted me about this picture about the municipal building, because they're taking down the building next to it, the old coffee shop building, college shop building, excuse me. And then the windows showed up. Now it looks kind of ugly because there's going to be a little breezeway there between the new building and the old municipal building. And all of a sudden now you see these windows that are bricked up. So they wonder what they can do cosmetically to it. They just want to know if there's a picture of it. And this thing just happened to have a line art sketch in it right here. And they wanted to see what the windows look like, but the trees along the edge on the courthouse side kind of obscure the windows. But then there is a picture of the courthouse, and it shows a piece of the municipal building to the side, and it shows a little bit of the windows on it. So I'll pass this around. You're welcome to look at this. Just want to get it back. Another thing, another eBay phone. So, how many of y'all are kin to the Watkins? And not ashamed to admit it. Okay. Jack, how are you kin?
Everybody in Prince Edward County is kin to them.
I believe you. I believe you. There you go.
I hope they were legally kin to them.
This is a book called Tearing Through the Wilderness. You heard of this? Who's heard of this? What's it about, Billy?
The Allen family, and they immigrating from here to Missouri, and starting a town called Farmville, Missouri.
There you go. First time I heard about this thing, I believe it was Julie Cox.
She told me.
She had some diagrams or something. I don't know if she had a copy or just got some copies of it or something. There was a copy on eBay last week, so I couldn't stand it. I had to get that. But they had this Allen flour mill, was not ours, but the one in Missouri. I'm told, though, that it's nothing there. It's just like Jamestown here today. There's nothing there. You know, Joe? That's just what I'm told. It's like nothing there now. You've never known that there was a place. So, I don't know. But it's got, Dale said it had some on the Woodsons in here. I haven't even had a chance to look at it much myself. But I'll pass it around. You're welcome to look at it. One other thing the membership could look at, we had a letter from Ms. Isla Koss of Potomac, Maryland. She wrote me a couple months ago saying she had some letter from a foster family relating somehow to Prince Edward County. And he wrote her back saying, you know, great timing, we're working on our collections now, and we'd love to have some representation of the foster family for archives, and so she sent this. And Phil has interpreted it as meaning 1813 is the date, and that makes kind of sense because it's Mississippi territory. This guy's moved from here from Prince Edward down to Mississippi. He's writing the folks back home about how he's doing and all, and he mentions a lot of military news. It kind of makes you think, you know, during the Civil War with the way he talks, but apparently it's not because it's Mississippi territory. I guess it became a state till the 1830s, if I'm not mistaken. So you can probably look in your pocket, find one of those commemorative quarters, and know for sure. He talks about, I have not heard from any of you since I left. Well, one letter dated June something, 1812, I guess. I wish you to write to me. At the very first opportunity, we have a good, plentiful crops this year and have nothing to do in the war. Yet, although we had a late draft here, which took every fourth man. But I do not think they will be called for, as they were destined against the Creek Indians, who are now suing for peace. I had not sustained my draft, being previously chosen lieutenant of the company to which I belong. Neither will I have to go until the older officers take it to town or something. I can't understand what that is. And that he's single and doing very well. But the interesting part, I guess, well, not just the letter itself, but how it's, you know, it's all folded up. This is the envelope front. And just the way it's addressed. I mean, the whole thing is just a big writing. Ezekiel Foster, Prince Edward County, Virginia, near the courthouse, to be left at the post office at the courthouse. 20 cents. Pass this around as well. New addition for the archives. There's Isla Koss. You think about it. Right, Isla, we thank you so much. And that will do it for me. Who's next? Come on up.
items that I'll pass around.
And the handmade bricks, and they chose brick because it was good clay in the area, is what I understand. And then I have one from the State Theater that I have to go with you. But this is one from Farmville High School, which is my alma mater, and I've made it into a doorstop and something that my children will be able to keep and know where it came from. Inside is the brick, and I have covered it with the mesh that you do the yarn work on, and it's FHS, Farmville High School. And it was built in 1912, and it was demolished or ended in 1959. And my initials on this end, and the date I graduated on this end. So that's my brick story.
There you go, I like
Show
it.
the colors.
Yeah.
And
And I ain't gonna tell you what I paid for it, two back down, thought I was crazy when I went to bed. And it made the knock to the railroad, you just kept changing in that line on that. I bought it up at Williams, going to the railroad. No, what?
is it brass?
Mm-hmm. And the bit, when they built it, locked together, they had the cow chain in there. Most of them, you don't see the chain with them. I bought it, William Gorman, his wife was son after he died. And I don't need no backing up here. Have you not met it?
Thank you. I usually have another meeting that conflicts with all of you, and I really prefer to be here. I shared this with Bill a while back, and I didn't know whether he had shared it with you all, but he indicated he had not. This is something that I unearthed with some of my mother's things, and I'm sure Virginia will know quite a few of the people, but it is a picture of 1919 Rice High School class. That actually is the second grade and some members of the first grade. And I have a listing of the people who are in it, except for one fella that's down here right on the end. And if anybody knows who he is, we can fill that name in. But some of the people that, well, the names that are on here are the ladies or their maiden names, not their married names. For example, this lady on this end is Doris Hughes, whom y'all would know as Doris Gates. And my mother is here with the bow. My mother is Mamie Hubbard Andrews McClenny, and her sister with the bow in her hair over on this side. And this young fellow right here, Dr. Terry. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting picture, and this is the sheet. Y'all would like to take a look at it.
Where is that school located?
Virginia, do you know where that school would have been located?
Well, the school, I don't know what Rice is, because the one that's, well, the building is still there now.
Right.
And that's the only one I remember everything about it.
I really do not know. My sister and I are trying to go through things that my mom had. We are unearthing tons of pictures, and I wish that we could have gone through that while Mo's memory was really, really sharp.
Go in there sometimes and ask Charlie Miller if he has any recollection of where that school was.
My mother might know, but I just kind of did this on the spur of the moment tonight. I wasn't sure I would be able to get it or not. But she has a lot of albums like Southern has back there. Physical church being built, a lot of pictures at High Bridge, and a lot of pictures of the Main Street of Florence, and lots of old houses that I have no idea what they are. This was one that I had from school days at Rice Elementary School. Excuse my poor vision, 1953 to 54. This was a class that I was in that Miss Hobson taught, and a lot of, I know the names of everybody in here Bobby Oakes, Bobby Schmidt, June Oakes, Auburn Estes, Wayne Lindsay, Martha Bass, Judy Thorpe, Mary Ann Smith, she was then, I've been there, Jewel Hodges, Louis Armstead,
But then that was what year?
53, 54. And this was taken, this was when they combined classes. They often would have two classes in the same room. And Ray Crawley and Alice.
When I taught you all in 52, 53, and it was not combined then, it was fourth grade, that's fifth grade.
And I think you taught me when I was in third grade.
You Bagley taught you
Third grade,
I taught you
fourth grade.
Miss Bagley taught you.
You still remember that, huh?
Oh.
remember,
We
yeah,
both
she was in fourth
remember.
grade.
Ask her, who
And
taught
a lot of those that you
ask her
met,
who
I
taught
taught.
first grade. Who taught first grade? Who taught first grade?
First grade, Clara Jenkins.
I don't remember her at all. I went there.
She was Clara Jenkins, she ran Thompson.
I remember Miss
I went
Bailey.
half the year, right? I went a half the year the first grade, right?
Well, the year that I taught, I didn't teach that but 1 year. That 1 year that I taught, Clara Jenkins Thompson was teaching first grade.
I do remember Miss Bailey.
And Miss Bagley in the third grade, can't remember the second grade. Miss Thompson, fifth grade, Miss Worthley, sixth and seventh grade.
Right. And this, I think, is, this side was the older class. And I think maybe there might have been half in one class and the other half. I'm not sure.
I just had all fourth grade, so I didn't have any by the same grades. I wouldn't have known who those kids.
You ready? Who wants to go next? So what's your bag of tricks there, Mo?
I'd like to take two, so I'll take this back to the back. Flora Woodson Boat, 1948, when I graduated.
They just had their reunion this past weekend.
Now, this is a lady's button, you know, where you button your shoes, lace it up, and it's got an eye handle. I don't know where I got it. And this is a piece of ivory. It's all ivory that's been carved, but I have no idea what it was used for. Where it was found on our place. Probably, I don't know, which is across the Appomattox River, here's Buckingham. And I have some things that they got me from our place, back in the Civil War, some of the bullets. This is one like that. Several of these. This is just a $2 bill, which everybody has some. I know I have 2 or 3. But I do have some authentic Confederate bills. This is in my daddy's family, $20 bill. So I know it's been in there in 1864, and he had 2 pennies. The penny is the biggest silver dollars. This is just a silver dollar that my dad had 3. He was born in 1902, and this is 1903. And Mama saved them and gave Garland one. He was named after
Are those Confederate coins?
These are, yeah, these.
They didn't make a lot of Confederate coins, a lot of the smaller denominations that made paper. Paper denominations, these county edition.
Well, how did you get all Daddy's money? That's what I want to know.
You got some? You
I
got some?
Maybe she was his favorite.
You probably spent yours at the store.
I don't.
You don't need to spend
I
it. This is kind of unusual. It's a big dollar bill. I don't know when they use them. That's what I can see today. And this is the one that, before they started putting the Dodge in truck.
I've got a feeling what they had to eat. Did you let me lock the bell?
Bigger because of the silver certificate, most of these were silver certificates. 1923.
She needs to leave all of that up and out and just let us look at it so we won't handle it.
All right. And this is a butter cow my husband made. Sure.
Is that the one you didn't break on me?
It's cracked. And these were found in our old house, which the first, the old part of the house, we just recently tore that down because he wants to use it room. And the first part, which we found, there was 2 houses, and the first part was just a store and a half, and it was all a breezeway between it. And then they built one of the 2 stores, and they used it.
That was 1848. The big pegs are usually some of the beams that had 20-foot long, 12 by 12 handling beams at the bottom.
Did y'all save all of them?
They gave them some of them.
No, I've got them all.
Oh, not
I think Tom Bailey got a lot of them. It was 1970.
And this was, inside the house, and leading up a stairway. Very long now. This is on the other side. And this, that's not long, and that's not fast. This is, lock. Evidently, y'all found it in the ground or something. Fancy.
See a lot of stuff up there. Every flashlight.
I've got lots of dictators. Check them out.
Who's next? Someone's got a big book back there. You want to share your book? Son?
This moment, yeah, I can do that too, wow. Come to pieces.
Well, a few little highlights of it, and then maybe you can go see if we can see different things.
What do I do?
Up here, or right there, or where do you want to do?
You're showing to the picture on the back of that glass, that page you got.
Which one that?
That's
I
right.
ain't sure. That's too wide. Y'all know most, I'm sure know of Miss Dunnington. That's Miss Dunnington, age probably 102, shooting crap at Christmas. I don't know how she did on that road. Anyway. And a couple small pictures there, hog killing that he probably is.
I've been about the time she sold.
And that's, best I can tell, that was Poplar Hill during the great snow of 1940.
We shouldn't be handling all this stuff, we could just lay it out on the bench or something. and
Never
not-
heard of it.
Stuff as long as you keep things on the front side.
I understand that Ms.
Anybody else? Mark? Richard?
I have a picture here. It's a building that's, used to stand down here where the library is in the parking lot. And Rich and I bought some old frames one time at an auction sale, and this was behind another picture, but anyway. And it has on here the American Rescue Workers. Anybody know anything about when they had?
And that was where the parking lot is now.
Don't you remember that
I have
house?
to see it.
But, that's the only thing I know, is it says it's American Rescue, Workers, children, emergency, home, children. So, I can remember my mother saying one time, and I showed her this picture, that she volunteered in this song, but then she didn't tell me anymore. That was it. Yeah. Get a good look at it. No, you get a bad telephone. Tell them what it is.
But that was something used by blacksmiths.
Did not know.
That's when they made wagons and buggies and so forth, and they put the iron around the rim. That was to measure the circumference for the wheels so they know how to cut.
It's got markings all over around it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then a little arrow here, I guess you could say.
So you would measure the circumference, that was to measure the circumference around the wheels, so you know how long to cut the strip of iron to put around the wheel.
Remember that?
Let's still got something like that today, or something on there.
Is any of it available?
How's that?
Is any of it, what is any of it in the market?
Is any of it available?
No, I do not, I don't have it. I would be, I'm sorry, but during my infancy, I didn't know any better, and I gave it away.
All right, we want to talk about my husband's family, the Covington family of, up in Elam. And they are, if you know any of the Pamplin, Hicksburg, Prospect Covingtons, they're all cousins somewhere down the line. Our home was originally built by George Carter. You were talking about Carters. This is the same Carter family, same George Carter that owns property in Prince Edward and Buckingham over in the Shepherd's area, and there are many of his descendants about it. And his daughter, Martha E. Patty Carter, was willed this house. Here's the plat where she was willed the house and 60 acres, and that she married Martin H. Covington. And we know that Martin came from Charlotte County with two brothers around the time of the Civil War up to the Hicksburg Prospect area. But we can't go any further back. We can't seem to find any further back than that. As I said, Martin married Patty. She had been willed the 60 acres and the house. At the time of her death, we have her will that she wrote, and she left the 60 acres and the house to her 4 children, who would have ownership of it when they were 21 years of age. And from what we have gathered from the records, her 2 daughters, 2 of the daughters died unmarried. One daughter, Rebecca, married Paul Lowe and had a daughter, Estelle, who is married to George Bigwin. Those children are in Richmond. And George H. Covington, which is Julian's granddad. And George H. Covington then proceeded to buy 41 more acres from the Carter estate. And he bought that in 1899 for $104. Then, this is the actual deed that was recorded at the courthouse. Then in 1901, he bought 93 more acres. And here's the plat and the deed to that, which the farm got up to 194 acres in size. And this house, the original, this front portion here, was built in 1808 by George Carter. And the chimney, that all the bricks were made on the place. And the chimney has a dated brick in it, 1808. And then George Henry Covington, his granddaddy, added the back portion of the house in the 1920s. This is a deed where George Henry bought out the third from Rebecca Covington's descendants, and then it became the farm. Then George Henry Covington married Susie Payne Abbott out of mathematics. They had 3 children. 2 died in infancy. His daddy, George Abbott Covington, was the only survivor. And then now we operate the farm. And at just before his daddy's death, when he realized that he was terminally ill, he gift deeded the farm, 2/3 of it to us and 1/3 to Julie's sister, who lives here in Farmville. And talking about cemeteries, we have a family cemetery on the place, and we have started taking pictures. And his great-granddaddy, Martin Covington, who married Patty and started this whole farm, had picked out a rock as a young man and stored it in the corn house and said, "This will be my tombstone." And then we have pictures of some of the other actual markers that are there, or other Covingtons that are buried there. And there are also some Fuqua in that family cemetery, if you're interested in tracing that. So that's the, oh, I do have a picture talking about Martin Covington. This gentleman here is Martin Covington. And he had a very long white beard, but for this special picture, it looked like he went to the beauty parlor or something and had it blow dried. It goes across like this instead of hanging down. And this is George Henry Covington, his son, his granddaddy, his wife, Susie, George Abbott Covington, his daddy, his cousin Estelle, and the dog Shep. This goes back quite a few years. And then Julian also has a love of money. And we have here a $10 bill from the People's National Bank of Farmville. It is a national currency, United States of Virginia, and we'll pass that around.
Did you bid on any of those 3 last week that were on?
I looked at them, but the prices that were there, I said, no way.
The $5 Dillon note went for $8,500.
We lost interest.
I lost interest when you saw the price. That was up to that.
Well, you know,
Yeah.
I've read all of the Farmville Mercury newspapers from 1873 to 1876. That's all that I know that exists. They're on microfilm along with the library. And it's very hard sometimes to slog through it because it's so faint. But I came across a real jewel, and many people, or at least those people who have read these back issues, have probably passed right by this without knowing exactly what it was. I'm going to pass this around in a minute, and this is the ad that appeared, and here is the transcription of it with a little explanation at the top. And I'll read the ad to you, see if anybody recognizes it. Prince Edward Randolph Lodge number ... UD will hold its first regular meeting at Masonic Hall on Thursday evening, the 17th instrument, at 7:30. All master masons of the Farmville Lodge number 41 and other sister lodges in good standing are invited to attend. Now, this was published September 17, 1874. Anybody know what the Prince Edward Randolph Lodge is? It's the Black Masons. the African American nation. So, since I helped them prepare their history for the Heritage Book, I recognized it as one. And I said, I got a real find here. So I took this to past master at Farmville Lodge and asked him if his lodge number was 41. He said, yes, it is. And I said, well, let me show you something, and here's what I think it means. I think that you guys helped the African Americans organize the Randolph Lodge. Not only that, but you held or allowed them to hold and actually officiated at their first meeting, and you held it at your Masonic Hall. This was just 8 years after the Civil War, and this is incredible. They knew nothing about it, so I took it to Randolph Lodge and talked to the present master, and he said he didn't know anything about it either, but both of them are going to go to their libraries and scour through their minutes, if they still exist, for 1874, to see what it means. The notice is signed by R.A. Booker, W.M., which means Worshipful Master. And so I was puzzling over exactly who he was, so I did a little further research. And it took a while, but I found him in the 1870 census. And I'm going to let me go ahead and start this around. I'm going to send this around too. This R.A. Booker is actually Richard Anderson Booker. And he was a publisher of the Farmville News in 1870 before it was sold and became the Farmville Mercury. He was, in fact, Worshipful Master of Farmville Lodge number 41. And what is really amazing about this story is that, I mean, all parts seem to fit together now. I said, why did the African Americans want a lodge? And how do they even know about masonry? Because masonry is supposed to be a big secret. So, I mean, why did they come up with the idea? Well, I think here's how it happened. In 1871, the masons of this lodge were given the honor of laying the cornerstone for Farmville's first courthouse. And Richard Anderson Booker was in attendance. The guest speaker was Reverend Dr. J. Lansing Burris, pastor of Farmville Baptist Church of Richmond. His speech, lauding the biblical virtues of Freemasonry, was the catalyst, I believe, that started the African Americans down the path that led to the establishment of Randolph Lodge, which is now number 30. At the time this ad was posted, they didn't have a number. So I'll pass this around too. And when I looked up his household in the 1870 census, there were a lot of interesting people there. So I've tried to find out something about as many of them as I could. For example, there was one that was mistranscribed as H.T. C-A-M-E-H, and I couldn't find anything about it. So I looked at it. Finally came up that they had misread the name, and I mean, it was really hard to figure out what it was. The only thing that I could find that fit was Henry T. Parrish, and he was a lawyer in Farmville. Then he became county court judge in Appomattox. The other interesting fellow who was here was a lawyer was P.W. McKinney. Anybody know who he was? He was going to be the future governor of Virginia. So these people who were